Thank you for joining us for another episode of True Crime, Myths, Legends, and More. Last time we had our first episode, we had Willis Morgan on here with us and talked about his book, The Frustrated Witness, and got to discuss all of the stuff around Dahmer being there in Hollywood, Florida, and what happened during that time. Also, what happened during the time he was in the military over in Germany. And I thought it was fascinating getting to talk to him and really getting all of the information, or not all of it, but some of the information that he has and has researched all of these years. And it is incredible. And this episode is no different. We've got someone else on here that is incredible and a little bit different, a little different killer tonight that we're going to talk about. So everybody has been enamored for years and years and years, and it has literally changed the landscape of how we investigate crime. The case of Ted Bundy is one that really grabbed everybody's attention, mainly because he was very, very charismatic. He had the looks, you know, he went into the courtroom, he represented himself, which was not necessarily the best idea. But, you know, of course, it got him the electric chair. But, you know, Ted Bundy really revolutionized the way that we understand crime. And because of how he did it, and because during the time, you know, nobody talked to each other. Like, you know, police departments never referenced anybody else, which is how he could get away with so many crimes all over the country for years. Not to mention he escaped from prison several different times and all of the wild stuff about that. So tonight we have a good friend of mine that's coming on and a Bundy expert in her own right. But we have EJ Hammon tonight. She is also one of the co-authors for, oh my goodness, I even looked it up. So EJ, I'll let you know the name of the book because I don't remember right now. I was going to pull it down from my bookshelf because I have it up on the bookshelf. Yeah, I don't remember. The monster something. She's like looking at me right now backstage, like pointing her finger, like shaking it at me. It's bad. Terrible. See, this is what happens when you're not prepared, people. Terrible. But she is a co-author of that book. She is also has the bundafile.com and where she does articles and everything about Ted Bundy. And she has been digging into this case for years. She has done an incredible job, and she was one of the first people that I went to when I was writing Beyond the Headlines, True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. She had a lot of insight into the Bundy chapter in there. And really is the one that kind of kicked me in the ass to do the book in the first place. So I give her a lot of credit for that because I probably would not have done it if it wasn't for her prodding. It certainly would not have gotten to Wild Blue Press and gotten published by like a real publisher right out of the gate if it was not for her prodding and telling me I needed to do it. So without further ado, we'll bring on EJ Hammon. What's up, EJ?
Hi, what's up?
There we go. We'll zoom in now.
Sounds good.
Okay, so since I fucked it up already, the name of the book.
Ted Bundy, Memories of the Beast.
There we go. I knew it had something to do with the beast. I don't know. I was thinking monster. I don't know why.
You're pretty close. You were close. Yeah. I'll let it go this time.
Oh man, it's okay because now that I have this podcast, I don't often know the name of my own book, right? Because when we started this journey out, it was just True Crimes, Myths, and Legends, and then we got the Beyond the Headlines because we decided to do a whole series. And you don't even know this yet because I haven't told you yet. I kind of decided this over this last weekend. But we always knew that chapter 1 or volume 1 was going to be serial killers. Yeah. Volume 2 is criminals. Volume 3 is cults and religions. And I have been seriously considering doing a volume 4 on assassinations and dealing with all kinds of conspiracies and myths and legends around assassinations and assassination attempts. And so I think that that'll be a lot of fun, digging into all of that stuff and digging
Yeah.
into some of the governmental conspiracies around that. And, then we get to bring it all here because that's what we're here for, right?
Right.
Learning all this other stuff that is not necessarily what you hear everywhere else. And
Exactly.
so tell us a little bit about yourself for the people that don't know who you are.
Well, you did mention that I've studied Bundy for a long time. I'm going to say at least 25 years, probably more. Just got fascinated with him, and he's really been my interest for a long time. But I do know a great deal about a lot of other lust killers, in particular, serial killers, some mass killers, some spree, But really, Bundy is really my main focus. I've been writing the BundyFile.com website since 2009. Just kind of just like thinking through different aspects of his life or his crimes and kind of analyzing them from a modern perspective. I also co-wrote a screenplay about the Baton Rouge serial killer, Derek Todd Lee, and we've done some filming on that. So we're currently in post-production, and that should be, hopefully we'll have some information about that soon. And but really Bundy is really what I've been interested in most, and it's as if I can't get enough of him. There's still things to analyze about him. There's questions to ask. There's still enough people still alive that we can go to and interview and get answers to questions that people just haven't even thought to ask. I recently interviewed one of the suspects of some of Bundy's crimes in Florida. He was a young man that was suspected of attacking the sorority sisters at Florida State University, and no one had ever interviewed him before. And it was easy enough to ask him. I just went, and in fact, I think I used Facebook and reached out to him and asked him, and he was, open to it. So really, a lot of times we don't want to ask victims or suspects or people who were involved in crime, but some of them really want to talk about it. So,
for sure.
Yeah. So the least, the worst they can say is no.
Yeah. It's so crazy for me because, I'm all around the country all the time doing conventions and stuff. And, people can come and talk to me and they do.
Yeah.
And I get all these crazy stories.
Mm-hmm.
And often I end up meeting, like family members and victims, and I'll meet people that were connected with the killers themselves. And it's, they all come up to tell me their stories. And it is just incredible to me. I really thought that early on I would get a lot of, pushback from those people and that they would be really upset about some of the things that I do. And it has been completely the opposite. I have gotten a lot of support from them and have had some really, really great conversations. And I think part of that is because they understand that I am not in any way trying to glorify any of these people, right? They are for sure pieces of shit and get exactly what they deserve in the end. But, I think that it is important to remember the stories and memorialize the history, right? We need to remember that history because it's important as we move forward and as we try to, understand and try to prevent the next generation of these types of killers. We understand them better. And if we don't really look at the people that have gone before, we will never understand the people that are coming, and we'll never be prepared for that. And speaking about Florida, and I shared this story with you not too long ago, because I was just down in Jacksonville. And while I was in Jacksonville, I met a gentleman who came up to me and he saw that I had a shadow box of Ted Bundy. And he came up and he said, "Man, I got to tell you this story." And I said, "Okay, what do you got?" He said, "Man, you're never going to believe this." And I said, "You could try me because I've heard a lot of things."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, I met Bundy one time." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he was an older gentleman. He was probably in maybe his 60s now, maybe late 50s, early 60s. But he said he was at a gas station there in Jacksonville at night. And while he was there, a white van pulled up and a guy got out in a white button-down shirt and a tie. And
Yeah.
he said it really disarmed him because he would have never expected it to be anybody with any ill intent or anything. The way he was dressed, he was very clean cut.
Yeah.
And he came up and he asked him, he said, "Hey, I need you to give me directions back to I-10, going back towards Lake City." Now, from what we know of the history of what Bundy did, we know that he tried to abduct a girl in Jacksonville. That was right before he abducted his last victim, Kimberly Leach.
Yeah.
And he went from Jacksonville. He had stolen the car somewhere over on the western side of
I can tell you.
of Florida. Oh, go ahead.
He stole the a white van from a church that was close to Florida State University there in Tallahassee.
Yeah,
and drove it all the way to Jacksonville.
Yep, and he drives it to Jacksonville. And so this night he comes out there. He's lost, and from a little birdie that told me that he was really bad with directions. I don't know who that would be, but when I was telling her this story, she let me know that. But yeah, so this guy, he gives him directions on how to get back onto I-10 and to go back west towards Lake City. And he stops, and I looked at him and I said, "I got one question for you." And he said, "What's that?" I said, "Did you give him good directions?" And he got this look on his face, and and all I could think of is it was shame, right? He was ashamed because he did. And he looked at me and he said, "I did. I really did. I gave him really good directions." And I said, "Listen, man," I said, "it is not, he was going to find his way no matter what. It has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
He was going to make that trip. You just happened to be the one that he asked."
Yeah.
And so, he looked a little bit more relieved then, but it was an incredible interaction that at a convention in Jacksonville, I get to meet the guy that literally gave the directions for Bundy to get back and go to Lake City and inevitably kidnap Kimberly Leach. And then we know what happens from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, with Ted, it's commonly believed that he started killing after the whole Liz thing and everything else, when he was engaged and all these different things were happening, that he starts killing as he's an adult. Right. Now, you and I have talked about this before, and it's always something that's always been fascinating to me. I cover it a little bit in the book, but I know that we were at a convention together. I don't even remember which convention that was.
Is that Dark History?
Was it Dark History Con?
That's the only one I think we've been to together.
Okay. So it would have been that one.
Yeah,
it was. It was the second year that we were at Dark History Con.
Yeah.
Because you had Nightingale.
Abigail was with me.
Yes, yeah. Abigail. Yeah, I was. Yeah. Facebook names, right?
Yeah, right. She's got a different name on Facebook.
Yeah,
but she and I were doing the presentation together.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that you discussed in the presentation. So go ahead, take it from here.
So it sounds like you're talking about Ted being suspected of murdering an 8-year-old when he was 14. This was a little girl who lived very close to him, several blocks away in Tacoma, Washington. This would have been 1961. And she went missing one night. It was a rainy night. Her parents were asleep, her sister and she shared a bedroom. And in fact, they had gotten up in the middle of the night because Anne Marie's sister was not feeling well. And they went to their parents' room, and their parents kind of shuffled them back into their room. And come morning time, Anne Marie was missing, this little 8-year-old blonde girl who there's no way she would have left the house on her own. So the parents got up and they noted that the front door was open. It's just cracked open still. And it just really boggled their minds. Well, police arrived and they started to investigate, and they found a bench that usually was in the garden that had been pushed up against a window. Now, the family kept the window open at night because it let in the cool breeze. So they located the outline in dew or some sort of liquid of a small shoe, a size 8 shoe. Looked to be, it could have been a young man's shoe, maybe a 14-year-old. And they located that on the bench. It looked like the window had been pushed open, so that's probably how he got in. And then they believe he just literally took the child and walked her out the front door,
Wow.
never to be seen again. The problem I have with believing that Bundy was involved, he was 14. He was, though he was already kind of stalking the neighborhood, looking for dirty magazines and trash cans and being a peeping Tom. It's hard to believe that he could have gotten away with just disappearing this young girl's body. She's never been found. And so I find it difficult to believe that either he did it by himself or that it's possible there could have been an adult involved, maybe that could have been helping him. But Bundy wasn't suspected until after he was arrested and became national news, and then police started, analyzing that crime again. The young girl's father believed after he was connected that he'd actually seen him. And, eyewitness testimony being as unreliable as it is, it's difficult to think that he'd actually seen him, but saw him something like near a school where they were putting concrete down, thinking that maybe her body was under the concrete, but they've not been able to locate her. So,
Wow.
yeah, so it's harrowing, but he very well is thought to have known her. At least she was a student of his uncle, that he was a piano teacher. And so she took piano lessons from the uncle. Bundy was a paper boy at the time. So he was, driving around the neighborhood, and he very well probably, saw her at some point. So,
Wow.
yeah. So I don't know if we'll ever know the answer to that mystery.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, it's one of those things like, especially during the time, because you said it was what, 1961?
61.
Yeah. So,
Mm-hmm.
In 1961, people went missing all the time.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
And like, so, the forensics isn't what we have now. So, unless, we have that show, The First 48, like, back then, if you didn't find somebody in the first day, there is a high probability that you're never going to find them unless they're buried in a shallow grave somewhere and, the animals dig it up. So, I think it's interesting that, we know that Bundy at the time was already starting to exhibit these really, really odd behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was already doing the peeping Tom thing. He was going around the neighborhood, and his paper route gave him the ability to do a lot of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So he's going around the neighborhood and he's seeing the things that he wants because he's interacting with these people. And so he's now going back at nighttime and he's looking in their windows and he's doing all this creepy shit. And it's amazing that he didn't get busted for it then. Right. I don't know. Were there many allegations during that time?
I don't even think his parents knew that he was leaving the home to just creep around in the middle of the night, which is a term that he actually used for it later when he was an adult. But yeah, I just don't think there was a lot of supervision of him. His mother was dealing with, a total of 5 children. He had 4 half siblings. And I just think they were so preoccupied with other things, and they never suspected that, the youngest child, who, by the way, his bedroom was in the basement, probably had a door that he could go out any moment. It just never occurred to them that he was doing these things and that his mind was becoming warped to the point of, what he was thinking.
In 1961, a 14-year-old was very, very different from a 14-year-old today.
True.
Right. And now, Christ, there are people that I meet that are in their 30s that still act like kids. Right.
Yeah.
And back then, like by the time you were 14, there were a lot of people out on the farm. Like you were almost a full-blown adult by then.
Yeah.
Right. You had already been working in the fields for years.
Yeah.
And so I think that, when we look at a lot of these cases that are a little bit older, that are not quite as recent as, the stuff that's going on right now, that the world that they lived in was very different. And we have to look at it in that light. We have to understand people where they were, because at 14 years old, parents would give responsibility to those kids.
Yeah.
Right. They would be watching the rest of the family. They might be the man of the house while dad is gone.
Mhm.
It's just a very, very different world with responsibilities and things. However, we know that Bundy before then, and this is one of the things that is a little bit controversial uh, uh, in some of the circles that we run in, because I talk about in the
Mm.
book about Bundy's childhood,
Yeah.
and that his childhood was, when we watched the final interview with Bundy, where he's with Dobson,
Oh
and
boy.
we know that there is a lot of posturing going on in this interview. There's a lot of
Mhm.
bullshit that's happening on both sides, not
Both
just
sides.
Dobson's side, but
Yeah.
also on Bundy's side, right?
Very much
And
so.
he's sitting there and he's espousing how great of a Christian childhood he had, and
Yeah.
we know that that's not true. We know that there are things in his childhood that were very difficult.
Mm.
There are stories of his grandmother with knives around the bed, and stuff like that. That he was digging holes and his friends could fall in them with stakes in them and stuff. That
Mm.
isn't normal behavior even
No.
back then, right?
No, and it was his aunt with the knives.
Oh, the
Yeah,
aunt.
it's his. She woke up surrounded by knives, and 3-year-old Ted was sitting right next to her, just grinning at her because
Yeah.
he was the one that had put them there. Yeah.
So it's funny. I don't know if you watched that, and we'll come back to this in a second. That whole Natalia Grace thing with that
No.
that girl,
Oh,
that
I know who.
disabled girl.
I know
Yeah.
who you're talking about. Hmm.
And that family had said that she was at the bed with a knife, like
Hmm.
smiling at them. And I thought it was interesting that
Yeah.
later on she gives the interview and she says, but the bed was like 2 feet high. She was like, I could barely see to the top of the bed. Like, how could I be leering over them? I'm only like 3 feet tall. And
Right.
I thought, man, it was just really funny. Like when I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, it seems really odd how that would even be possible. But
Yeah.
that whole story has so many crazy sides. I don't know
Oh,
what's true and
yeah.
what's not.
That's
That
a really strange one.
it is.
Hmm.
Maybe one day I'll get some of the people involved in that on here,
You should. That'd be
because
interesting.
the one foster dad,
Yeah.
that guy, he's a strange dude.
Yeah. Right.
Very, very strange guy. I'm like, what
Yeah.
in the hell is wrong with them? Okay, so what are your takes on Ted's upbringing?
Well, we know that he was born out of wedlock in Burlington, Vermont. Of course, his family lived in Philadelphia, and his mother was sent away to have him there. She never told anyone who the father was. I don't know how many family members may have known who the real father was. Suggestions were that it was her father. You consider how violent he was, how he was known to be a very violent individual. Ted was raised in his grandfather's home there in Philadelphia after his mother brought him back from Vermont. Lived there for 4 years, and then found a way out of that household because, again, the allegations that the grandfather was so violent. If Ted was already acting out by age 3, it seems likely that he saw violence from his grandfather towards the women in the household. So he's already aligned. Plus, he loved his grandfather. He clung to him. He was really connected with him. So he probably identified with his grandfather, and then he sees him committing violence against the women in the household. There are certain allegations there that he perhaps pushed one of his daughters down the stairs for not getting up on time. And just was verbally abusive and probably physically abusive. So Ted's witnessing this. By the time he's 4, he's being moved to way across the country. So he doesn't see his grandfather except, very, very rarely. And, so he's kind of fish out of water. His mother married very quickly because, an unwed mother in the early 50s at that time was looked down upon. So she married very quickly. Ted was 5. And then once she got to Washington and got married, his new stepfather adopted him. So a lot of people will say stepfather, meaning Johnny Bundy, his dad, but he was literally his legal father because he adopted him. So it's more accurate to say adopted father. And so by virtue there, when he had 4 step siblings or 4 half siblings, they're actually legally his full siblings because he was adopted by the stepfather. So, yeah, he was much older than his siblings. So he was constantly the one who was babysitting. When you talk about getting responsibility there, being put in a position he probably did not want to be in. I mean, I don't know a lot of teenage boys that want to babysit for their younger siblings. There was an allegation made by, not by the person that apparently experienced the act, but the psychiatrist that interviewed Bundy for his appeals in 1986, Dorothy Otnow Lewis, who indicated at some interview that he admitted to having either inappropriate feelings or committing inappropriate acts against one of his sisters. There's no other evidence of that. He never said anything, to indicate that, but it wouldn't surprise me, even if it were just peeping, because he was definitely doing that by the time he was 14. Yeah. So, his mother was so deep into religion and, living this kind of virtuous life, that I don't think she really took much time to consider what he was really dealing with. And she might not have been capable of even knowing what a young boy at that time would have been, the frustrations and their confusion at that age and puberty. And I can't imagine. Plus, she's got 4 other young children that she's caring for.
Well, you think about that. We're now at the place where we understand, or most people understand, that those formative years, those years up until you're in your preteens, adolescence, are the years that really, really shape who we are for the next 50, right? And there are things that we hear during that time, and everybody can attest to this. You have somebody that said something really nasty to you, and for the next 30 years you carry that in your head. Especially if it's a parent or a maternal figure in your life. Especially for women, they hear it a lot. Oh, you're just too fat, or this or that, and then they carry that. And they carry that trauma throughout their life. And it makes it very, very difficult. I know myself personally, my mom would always tell me that I'd never be anything, that I'd never amount to anything, and that I was a piece of shit, and that I would, I always get myself in trouble. And so for a long time, it took me 25 years to deal with just that little bit of stuff, to realize that, I don't have to live in that. I don't have to be that person. I don't have to make that prophecy come true. I can choose to be something else, but not everybody gets there, right? We all struggle through that. So when we know that in childhood, all of these things crop up, and it makes it very, very difficult. And when you have such a traumatic upbringing and all the moving and, the abuse, and seeing the abuse at an early age, that leaves an impression that shapes those neural pathways in our brain, and it gives us these things. And you see it with lots and lots of different killers. You'll see it with, like, I think it was Dennis Nielsen, who saw his grandfather in the casket and realized that when he was a kid, that it gave him some kind of sexual feeling, which is why later on in life he got aroused by corpses, right? So, there is something that happens in childhood, especially as we're going through puberty, and we're now associating everything with, okay, what is this? Why am I getting aroused? What is it that's arousing me? And these things get stuck in us. And so for our lives, we try to understand that or try to figure it out. And some people are just not capable of doing that. Part of that may also be why Dahmer had an affinity for dead things, right? We know
Hmm.
that he was doing the taxidermy very early. Also, again, in his formative years when he was going through puberty, and he starts associating this stuff with sexuality.
Right.
And so it ends up being something that comes out as he gets older and really struggles with that later on in life, and inevitably kills and cannibalizes and does all kinds of things with
Oh,
bones.
yeah.
But
Oh, yeah. And,
but
his father merely wanted to teach him science. That was
yeah,
kind of, despite his father knowing that he was always drawn to fire. In the book, he talks about how he very well could have been an arsonist. So you can kind of see how Dahmer's path genetically could have been moving in that direction anyway. And then his dad's just innocently trying to teach him about animals and the body and anatomy, and it ends up getting really distorted and perverted, and that's really unfortunate.
yeah, because Lionel was a science geek, right?
Yep.
And he's just looking for a way to connect with his son, who
Right.
is obviously struggling and having difficulty in school and everything else. And he finds something that they have in common. So he uses that, right? Just like
Yeah.
any other parent would, to try to like figure out how we get on the same page with our kids, is trying to find commonality. What are we both interested in? What
Yeah.
can we go and enjoy together? And that ends up ultimately, and of course, we mentioned this, that in his book, he's questioning that, right? He's
Yeah.
questioning, like, oh my God, was it
Right.
because of what I did? Was it because of all those things that I showed him that he became what he became?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is no, right?
Right.
But we can never really understand, or you know, we try to shape our children the best way that we can. If you're a responsible parent, right? There are plenty of people that are not responsible out there, don't give a
Right.
shit. But if you're a responsible parent, you try to do all that you can to instruct your kids and send them off in the right way. But ultimately, it is their decision, right? They're going to
Yeah.
decide their fate, and they're going to make choices. And you hope that they make the right choices and that they
Yeah.
make smart choices,
Definitely.
but it doesn't always work that way. And honestly, I've tried to always put this in perspective for myself, is that life can change radically in a second, right?
Yeah.
One word, one event can radically change our lives. Often not for the better, right? And
Right.
sometimes it is better, right? And that's good.
Yeah.
But, if I was to go out tonight and, the roads are kind of wet here because it was raining earlier today,
Hmm.
and I go out there and I'm driving a little bit too fast and I cross the center lane and I run head on with somebody and kill them. I'm going to spend time in jail for vehicular manslaughter, right?
Yeah.
That would radically change my world. And it can happen in a second. Doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. Doesn't mean that I was drinking all day. It can
Hmm.
happen, and it can
Yeah.
radically change our lives. Now, when you add in there all this trauma and all this other stuff, when these events that happen, because what we do psychologically is we look for events that support our worldview, right? So we look for these
Yeah.
things that, if we're struggling with trauma in the past, we're looking for these things that support that. And so we find them.
Yeah.
And it just happens that way. We find the things that support us. It's one of the reasons why people get stuck in bad relationships over
Hmm.
and over and over again, because they can't break free from the cycle, because they're looking for the same thing, because that's
Yeah.
what's familiar, that's what they're comfortable with. And then they think it's good and it turns really bad. And then they wonder, why do I keep doing this?
Yeah.
It's because that's just humanity, how we are. And it's very
Definitely.
difficult until we can break out of that. But Bundy, we see that throughout his life, growing up like that. In his adolescence, he becomes a peeping Tom. He
Yep.
starts moving through all of that. And then he finds somebody, which is always very interesting to me. So t- tell us a little bit about that.
So, I imagine you want me to tell you about Diane first.
Yes.
Okay. So Diane was Bundy's college girlfriend. She's from California, and they were attending school together. And they met in '68, and they had a relationship for a few months. I think that she was, well, first of all, she was very classy. Her family had money. That was something that Bundy always wanted to, he wanted to have money too. Unfortunately, his family was not wealthy, but he was drawn to Diane, and she was this beautiful brunette who was very well accomplished, and she had a really successful trajectory in her future. She wanted to marry a successful man, and she thought initially that the way he presented himself, that he had ambition and motivation, and so he did come across as successful. And he obfuscated, which he was known to do a great deal, and kind of presented himself constantly as someone with money. He borrowed a neighbor's car, a really nice car, and she didn't know it wasn't his. And he made dinner for her one night, and he'd borrowed the dishes that he was using that night with her. So really trying to impress her. Over time, she started realizing that he lied a great deal, that he was not the person that he said he was. And she kind of began to cool off as far as her feelings went. And he could kind of tell that things were changing. So he was still really surprised when she broke things off. It really just, I think he kind of spiraled at that point. He'd never had these feelings for anyone before on any deep level, as much as someone who had experienced the trauma and was probably a burgeoning psychopath by that time could feel. But he was devastated, that she was able to just break things off and walk away. He actually went to her college a couple of times and just like snuck up on her, but was probably stalking her, honestly.
Yeah.
But she didn't know the whole time what he was doing. So he kind of surprised her, and she didn't seem happy about it. So he ended up kind of spiraling. Now, Anne Rule, the author of the book The Stranger Beside Me, she was someone who knew him. She was also an author and a former police officer. She had essentially tied Bundy into this particular breakup and said, she thought that he started killing because this happened. Now, there's nothing, she's the only reason that theory's out there. There's no one that's ever, no psychiatrist that's ever said anything about that. It's highly unlikely that necessarily is what pushed him, like someone breaking up with him. I think it's, a very difficult situation like that could have made him act out, but there's no evidence that he started killing at that point. Besides, that was 1968. And so she was kind of the first girlfriend. Do you want me to move into the next one at this point, or did you want to talk more? Okay. So Liz, Elizabeth Klepfer, was a young woman that he met at a bar in 1969, and they got along really well. And she had a daughter, and Bundy very much liked the idea of a family. I don't think he really understood what it would mean to be part of a family, to actually, be a working part of a family. But he liked the idea of kind of having the girlfriend and, the partner, and then the child that he could look like he was kind of helping care for. And but at the same time, there was really no depth of feeling, I don't think, for either of them. He was very connected to Liz, but he didn't want to marry her because she wasn't wealthy. He didn't want, he also, her looks didn't meet the standards that he felt that they should. She was kind of plain and mousy, and she wasn't glamorous and didn't wear expensive clothes, and that was really who he would have wanted to marry. But he kept her around because he could use her. She was very much a someone that made him look normal. He would occasionally go to church with her and her family. Her family, she described herself in her book as a lapsed Mormon. So they would occasionally, I think, go. So he would get all dressed up, and he would insist that his girlfriend wears very specific, conservative clothes. He made sure that she looked the part, along with her daughter, Molly. And, it seems like he really liked the idea of playing the part. of being in a relationship, but he was seeing other women, at the time. But a lot of people have asked me, well, wasn't Bundy an incel? And for those that don't know what an incel is, involuntary celibate, it's generally not someone who is capable of getting women. And
Yeah.
Bundy was very capable of it. He just, he didn't make a big deal out of it, but he also didn't hide it very well. I think that Liz found out about more than one of the women that he was with. And she even described an incident where she went out with a guy. She didn't really want to, but she was trying to get back at Ted, and he found out about it and became very, very distraught. And of course, you can't cheat on him, but he can cheat on you. Yeah, he and Liz were together for a good 7 years up until his first trial in Utah.
Yeah, because he was actively killing while him and Liz were together.
Yes.
And so we know that for sure. We don't know if he was doing that before then, but we know for sure he was actively killing when those two were together. We also know that during that relationship that he gets back with Diane for some of that time, right?
Yes.
And so he will go and actually propose to Diane and then do it really as a revenge, right?
Yes.
For her kind of breaking it off with him. He then gets the power and the control and gets to break it off with her. And, as we learn about Bundy and his psychology, is that it was always about the power and control, right? It was always about being smarter than everybody else and knowing better. And so he could get that control because he felt that when they broke up, that he lost all that control, right?
Yes.
That she beat him out, and he was never going to allow that to happen.
Right.
So, he goes back and he gets her to fall in love with him again, and then he just drops the bottom out on it, which is interesting because, this is one of the things that you and I discussed. And, one of the myths is that, of course, Bundy killed all these other women, but didn't kill Diane or Liz, right? And but that doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't do really, really dirty shit to both of them, to really mess with them and to cause all kinds of problems. I think the reason why he didn't kill Liz is because she was the cover, right? And having the whole family made him above suspicion until the first trial, and then he had no choice.
Well, and remember, he did try to kill her.
Okay.
Do you remember us talking about that? Yeah, he opened or he closed the flue in her chimney and then set a fire. And then before she and Molly woke up, he actually went and extinguished the fire and opened all the windows and everything. And Liz actually said that she remembered waking up and there was smoke throughout the house. So she's, coughing when she's waking up. And so he at least considered it. He came very close. But I think he did think better of it.
I think it's interesting because it's interesting that he had enough understanding and enough feeling towards the child that stopped him, right? So
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't think that. No, I don't think. And there's also another allegation from her. Have you and I talked about the allegation she made against him later?
I don't think so.
Okay. So when Liz wrote a book many years ago, it was published in 1981, The Phantom Prince. And of course, it's about a relationship with Ted. Well, the book was reissued a few years ago, and Molly actually wrote the first chapter. So the little girl, and she made allegations that he was inappropriate with her at least once. There were other times that she wasn't as didn't feel as strongly about her, didn't note as much in the chapter. But yeah, there was one in particular where he was inappropriate with her, and he didn't assault her, but there were certain actions that he took that were very wrong. Yeah. And so when she was 7, so Anne Marie was 8.
Yeah.
And so, it kind of makes me think, well, that might tilt it a little more in that direction. If maybe that was his starting point for attraction to females.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we always talk about, you get into victimology, right? And so we start talking about these commonalities between the victims, and for Bundy,
Mhm.
there is a certain type, right? The dark hair and the certain build
Mhm.
that seem to follow many of his victims. But what we don't often think about is very much the same thing in the Dahmer case. We know that Dahmer is, initially arrested for exposing himself in front of kids, right?
Yep.
And so there is something to be said for many of these people that experience this trauma, because it starts in childhood, and
Mhm.
because they're associating those things, that it's never far away. Even if they kill adult females,
Right.
it doesn't mean that if the opportunity didn't present itself, if the opportunity was there, that they wouldn't assault children,
Right.
that they wouldn't kill children. So, and we see that in many of them, right? Even
Yes.
Gacy killed predominantly, teenage adult, young adult men, but
Mhm.
he also would kill, younger men too, right? Like
Yeah.
early teens.
Yeah.
Does that mean that he never killed any children? We don't know that. We don't know that we know the 33, but we don't know if there were more than that. And there is a good probability that there is.
Yeah.
So, it's when we're talking about people that will kill other human beings, there is no like there's no border there. Like
No, no boundary.
if the opportunity presents itself, they will fulfill whatever sick desires that they have with
Yeah.
whoever is there with them.
Yeah.
So there's no hard and fast rule, even if we think that is the case.
Right.
And we wonder why there are these weird anomalies. So
Yeah. Nobody is ever really safe. I mean, people have asked me if Bundy ever killed a man. We're not aware of that, but and I think with him it was more about being intimidated by men. I think he didn't feel that he could prey on them nearly as easily as with women and possibly girls. He had two 12-year-old victims as well. So, you know, how hard is it to say that it? I'm not sure what that is.
I don't know, that's our paranormal
Okay.
side of the show. I don't know what the hell that was. That was on your side. You got the weird
Here,
demons. I don't know.
I promise.
Get some. I don't know what that was. That was very strange.
Okay, as long as I'm not the only one that heard it.
So,
Okay.
in this little paranormal segue, I will. I've told you about this before, and it's
Yeah.
really funny. I had a friend of mine. I'm actually going to do this convention this weekend. I'll be in Marietta, Ohio,
Hmm.
for a paranormal convention there, with Hidden Marietta Paranormal Society. They do an excellent job there.
Hmm.
And so when I was there last year, there is a girl that does intuitive paintings, right? And
Okay.
so I was like, hey, you know what? I'll check it out. I'll go do one. So, because it's fun sometimes when you're in Rome, do as the Romans, right?
Sure.
So I went up there and I got one done, and she did this thing, and I don't think it's here right next to me. It used actually, I think it is. It is. It's right behind me here. So I'll actually show you guys. I haven't shown anybody this, but this is the intuitive painting that
Oh,
she did for me, right?
yeah.
So what she said is what she got is that there was a spirit that was following me, but it was protecting me in all of these endeavors that I do, right?
Mm.
And to all of the true crime stuff. And so this entity will like be
Entity.
there and kind of keep me out of all of the bad stuff. So they
Oh
keep
boy.
me protected, which was interesting. Now, what's more interesting than that, and which relates to this discussion, is she went home and she said that she started having dreams of other serial killers that were trying to contact her. One of them was Bundy. And she said that she believed that Bundy had a message for me. And apparently he said that from hell he could see me and he knew what I was doing, and he was not happy about it. And, and my response was, "You're the one burning in hell. I don't think you can do anything to me now. So
Right.
do whatever you're going to do." And so I thought it was really interesting. She did another painting of this person like chewing off their tongue and burning in hell. And I
Mm.
actually have that.
Yeah.
I have a print of that that I sell at conventions with me, and it says "Burn Bundy Burn"
Oh,
on
I
it.
love
You
it.
know, yeah.
Yes.
So it's like it was just really really interesting that would be the case.
Yeah.
And she also mentioned that Dahmer was trying to talk to her
Mm.
and give me a message. I never did hear what that was. Maybe I'll hear this weekend.
Maybe.
I'll be interested to hear if there was any further communication. You
Right.
know, I know your feelings about all of that stuff,
Yeah.
and but I think it's interesting, if nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah, for
There's
sure.
it's a fun little thing, and people get enjoyment out of it, whether they take it so seriously or
It's
not.
entertainment to me, but it's whatever. It's fine.
But there you go. There's your little paranormal
Yeah.
sidebar tonight.
Nice. So Bundy's
Little,
been reaching out to you.
apparently, he
Yeah.
does not like me. It's okay. He doesn't
I
have to.
mean, what are you gonna
Uh,
do?
yep. I haven't gotten the electric chair yet,
Not
uh,
yet.
but he did. So
He did.
I
He
think
did.
he can keep that one for himself.
Yeah.
I don't want it. I don't like
Exactly.
electricity to begin with.
I was talking to one of the neighbors of one of the young women that Bundy attacked in Florida. So Debbie Ciccarelli, she was the neighbor who called police and actually saved her next door neighbor's life. And she was interested in going to the execution. So
Oh wow.
she was talking to someone at the sheriff's department or the courthouse there, and they said, no, I don't want you to go and witness that because you'll never be able to forget it. You'll never get it out of your head. And she was always thankful that she didn't go, but she for until he was executed, she was always afraid he was going to come back and get them.
Wow.
Yeah. And she was actually interviewed for court. He was the one that was deposing these young women like Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, and the people that he attacked. He was interrogating them for the purpose of court. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well,
She still has a newspaper from the day when he was executed because she says that helps her remember that he can't come and hurt her.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing that they allowed that to happen, right? Because this is, this guy is now interrogating not questioning, witnesses to this crime that he himself committed.
Yep.
And just re-traumatizing those people, really just for his own jollies, right? Because he, of course he was getting off on all of that he got the opportunity to play the big smart lawyer, that he was out there being able to do that. And it's just, it's amazing that he was able to do that. It's one thing to be in your own defense. It's a whole nother thing to question witnesses, to do that. Wow. Like
people that you terrorized.
Yeah, that's wild. Like, I can't imagine that should ever be the case.
If someone is acting as their own attorney, I think they still have that privilege. Unfortunately, I don't know that that's changed.
I would think that you would have to, like, there should be something else, because it's not like it's not like he was just the only attorney, right? Like, even when he was acting as his own counsel, he had other counsel there.
Yes.
They could have asked the questions to the victims rather than him doing it, right?
I guess whether or not he insisted on doing it.
Oh, I'm sure. But it's like, man, like how do you allow that to happen as a judge? Like, that's wild.
I mean, Cowart had no power in that. He couldn't have prevented that from happening, unfortunately.
Wow. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So this is one thing we haven't talked about at all,
Okay.
that I think is interesting. I'd love to get your perspective on
Hmm.
it. So the escape attempts by Bundy,
Yep.
of which there were many, not just the
Right.
two that we always
The two
talk about.
successful ones. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, you want me to talk
yeah,
about each one?
yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, so there was one in Utah where he was arrested initially in Utah for attempted kidnapping there for Carol DeRange, and he was found in the yard with several items, I believe. Yeah, he was found in the yard with several items like maps and some money and things that they knew that he could use to get him out of the jail. And of course, that was confiscated. So he was not successful breaking out of Utah, thankfully. Then he was sent to Colorado for the murder of Karen Campbell there, and he was initially held in Aspen. So that was well, the name of the county escapes me, but he was held there, and then in 1977, and he escaped from the courthouse and goes running around, gets lost for 8 days, and then he's arrested once he's found trying to steal a car. And then he escapes from the Glenwood Springs prison in December of that year, so just 6 months later, makes his way all the way down to Florida. And then when he is, once he's in Florida prison, he also tries to escape from there, and he's caught with items in his cell. And of course, he's forced to change cells. But yeah, those are the 4 known escaped attempts and 2 that were successful. There probably were more.
So
Bundy did not want to be held.
no,
Right.
he was always, even until the last day,
Yeah.
trying to find a way that he could get off,
Yep.
whether it was getting another stay of execution, at
Mhm.
which nobody really talks about this. I don't know why. He had
Oh,
several, right?
yes.
It
Yes.
wasn't just like he was trying to do it the final time.
Right.
I think he had, how many did he have? 2 or 3?
He had, let me see, there were 2 in 86. And then he might have had one more in 88. But then, of course, he was executed in 89.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And
So I
that's
know.
typical. It's usually, I believe it's usually 3 dates are set. And so he had 2 pretty close together in 86. And then his appeals attorneys were able to convince the judge to give them more time. So we got a couple more years. Yeah.
So I believe it was the one in Florida, that last escape attempt where he had actually sawn through some of the bars.
Yes.
Yeah. So he was close to trying to get that one out. Of course, we know that when he was in the one prison, he went up through the ceiling tiles, which is interesting because when I was a corrections officer, I worked at a county jail, and right after, like maybe 6 months after I left, there were 3 people that escaped through the ceiling tiles in the bathroom.
Wow.
Yeah. So thankfully I wasn't there at that time, but a couple months after I left, there were several escapes. And it always makes me think of the Bundy escape because he went up through the ceiling tiles. Very much like, this, the whole, what's the movie? The Stephen King
Escape
movie.
Stephen King?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh my, Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, yeah.
Where he very, there's a lot of similarities because, he went up into the ceiling, got into where the pipes and everything were.
Yep.
And, you see the same thing there, where he crawled through the football field of,
oh my gosh,
of shit.
Yeah. Well, Bundy was, he crawled into the ceiling and then was able to climb into a jailer's apartment. So apparently some of the jailers lived there at the jail, and stole some money and stole some of his clothes and was able to make it out of the jail and hitchhike out of town. So yeah.
So it's funny, like when and you talked to, well, we talked about it, but Bundy did not have a good sense of direction.
No.
And we see that when he was there in Colorado, when he escaped, right? He gets out there and he gets lost on the
Yeah.
side of the mountain. He almost starves up there, right?
Yes.
Because he doesn't have any food for
And
several days.
And he had sprained his leg when he fell out of the courthouse window. So keep in mind, it was the second floor of the courthouse, but that courthouse kind of tilts back. And so it almost feels like 2.5 stories. It seems a lot higher than 2 stories. So I can see how he could easily hurt himself that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But man, you think about that, that at that point, if he would have, how many people would that have saved if he would have just fell out and broke his neck and they'd have found him outside of the courthouse, but, sadly that is not the way it works.
No, and it's interesting you say that. I actually spoke with one of the survivors from the Florida State attack, the sorority house attack, which of course happened after that escape. And I asked Kathy if she was resentful of the Colorado jailers, or, she had any animosity, and she, being the wonderful person she is, has no sense of animosity towards them. But I could see how you would, though. This is your charge, and you let him escape, and then he kills people and, attacks others. And
yeah,
it just,
one of the things that I always found fascinating is we look at the way that Bundy killed before Colorado, before Florida. And to me, there has always been a big difference in the way that those crimes happened.
Yes.
And, he was very calculated before that. He took his time, he, lured these women by a bunch of different methods, whether it was the cast and, all of that stuff, asking for help and getting them to help him and then, turning on them. But now you go down to Florida and he is almost in a frenzy, right? The killing is very, very different. It's very violent. Not that the way that he killed before wasn't violent, but this was a whole different, you really see in Florida the monster that Bundy had become comes out. And, before then, he was still a monster, but he was controlled.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now he gets to Florida and it's like he can't even control himself, even for a second.
Well, that's organized versus disorganized. Very much, the calm and cool, collected guy that wasn't being hunted by police and wasn't on the run was able to take his time. And then you get to Florida, he's on the run from Colorado and just losing his mind. He hasn't killed in years and just losing his mind.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things. I don't know if I want to associate myself with this, but I guess I'm going to anyway, right?
Right.
I fought professionally for a long time, and I was just talking to one of my former roommates in college, right? And one of the things that he mentioned to me is when I was in college, when I wasn't actively training, I was a bitch to be around because I would grab people and I'd elbow them in the head and kick them in the leg and throw them on the ground and choke them. And I was very, very physical if I wasn't doing what I was conditioned to do. And as I'm older now, obviously my body isn't quite what it used to be. And my testosterone is not at the place where it once was. I'm not running around grabbing people and throwing them on the ground anymore.
Yeah.
But I did that for a long time in my life. And that is not dissimilar to what Bundy must have been experiencing, right?
Yeah.
And, this is something that he did in a very controlled way through a large part of his life. He was very happy doing that. Yeah. And now he's not been able to do that. And he gets down there to Florida and he literally can't control himself.
Right.
He is out of control. And, you would think that someone who has escaped from prison, who is trying to hide out, would calm down. But in his mind, he just couldn't. There was no stopping him. Yeah. And, when he gets down there, he attacks those women in the Chi Omega house. And that's not the only person that he hurts there. in that same night. And then he goes on to stalk the girl in Jacksonville, and her brother comes up and stops him, and
Yeah.
then eventually kidnaps Kimberly Leach,
Yeah.
his final victim. But it's just unbelievable how he just like lost all control as soon as he had an opportunity, and he felt he was far enough away from the
Mm-hmm.
crimes up there in Colorado.
Yeah.
He was going to do what he was going to do, and satisfy those desires
Right.
however he could.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. And he was only in Florida for a week before he attacked the sorority sisters. Now, they were not his initial target. His initial target was Cheryl Thomas. She was a young woman that was a student, a ballet student, so very athletic, long, beautiful brown hair. She lived slightly off campus. So I actually have walked that whole thing from where he was staying near campus to the sorority house, which is about half a mile. And then on the other side of the sorority house, it was her house, about half a mile. So it was all within a 1 mile walking range. So he goes to Cheryl's house that night, wanting to attack, kill her. She's not home. So he ends up going to this little bar that's maybe half a mile away. It's close to the sorority house, and tries to pick up women. Well, he's already keyed up, and it's very obvious that he's not normal like all the other guys at the bar. So no women want to hang out with him. He ends up dancing with a young woman, and I think she felt like she had to, but she like turns around and tells her roommate she's going to dance with an ex-con, which she didn't know she was correct about that. And then, so he can't pick up any women. This is going past like 1 and 2 in the morning. So he leaves the bar eventually, and they think, Kathy Kleiner and I were talking, and she said, I think she followed Margaret, one of the young women that he did kill from the sorority house. Or it could have been another young woman, Lisa, that was killed that night. There's no real clarity on which one it was who was at the bar. But he went into the sorority house and went to the second floor, which is interesting to me. He didn't go to the first floor where he could have gone in and out and gotten out quickly. He goes to the second floor, I think with the idea he was going to kill as many women that night as he could. Gets into the first 2 young women's rooms and is able to bash them with a piece of firewood that he picked up outside. So obviously an disorganized crime. Didn't even have his weapon with him. So he attacks them, beats them to death, goes into Kathy and Karen's room, begins beating them, and then a car light shines in the window. They didn't have their windows curtains closed. So that spooks him. He runs out, and then he doesn't kill either of them because he's not able to. And then he ends up going down the road back to Cheryl's house. And that's when he attacks her, and her roommate calls police, and she survives, thankfully. But yeah, the sorority house was not the original target. They just ended up being the first target because he couldn't get to the one that he wanted to be with. So yeah, and just having to kind of walk through all of that and consider what he was thinking and how frantic he must have been by the time he got to the sorority house, and having been standing right there at that side door of the sorority house where he must have entered last year was really jarring. But it actually gave me a great deal of perspective. So I was really glad that I got to do that. Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do nearly what you did down there, but I've been to the Chi Omega house. I did go, and I was at the middle school where Kimberly Leach was abducted.
Yeah.
And I've also been to where he dumped her body 40 miles northwest of there.
Yeah.
And so it was quite the experience to be there at the school and to be standing there underneath the tree where she would have entered in the other building.
Yeah.
And to look out to where Bundy stopped the van and jumped out because he blocked traffic when he did it.
Yeah.
And, he jumps out, he grabs this girl and brings her back to the van. And to just think about like how easy that was for him to do. And it was just amazing. And of course, I was there, and it's no longer a school. It's a administrative building for the school district now. But the caretaker comes out of one of the buildings, and I'm standing there in the courtyard, and he kind of looks at me funny. He goes into the other building, and I grabbed some dirt, and he pops his head back out and he says, "Hey, what the hell are you doing over there?" And I said,
Right.
"Oh, well, I said, well, I know that Bundy was here, and I do a bunch of true crime stuff, and I'm just kind of in town, going through down to Tampa at the time. I was going down to Tampa,
Yeah.
and I was like, I'm just going through, and I was just checking it out. I was curious to see where he was at, and what he was doing." And he was like,
Right.
"Well, I went to school with Kimberly." Like, I was
Yeah.
here the day that she was abducted. I was a couple years younger than her, but I was here that day and I remember that. And so we had a conversation about that, and it was a really good conversation. And I'm glad he didn't call the cops on me. That was good too. So
I remember you telling me that story, but you didn't get his name, did you?
I did not.
Oh,
No. He was an African American gentleman. He
yeah.
works there at the thing. I'm pretty sure he probably still works there. It's not a big town.
Right. Okay. So maybe I could go find him.
Yeah, for
Interview him.
sure. He's a
Okay.
very, very nice guy.
Well,
He definitely he said to me, one of the last things he said to me is, I said, yeah. I said, well, when Bundy was here, there wasn't any real security. And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, yeah, now we got cameras everywhere.
right.
And
Exactly.
I was like, well, thanks for letting me know that. Let me get the fuck out of here.
He's like giving you a little warning there. Wink, wink.
Yeah.
Nudge,
Yeah,
nudge.
he's like, hey, it's time for you to get out of here, brother.
Yep.
I was like,
Yeah.
but
That's hilarious.
but yeah,
Yeah.
so we have all of that stuff, and
Yeah.
so give me your thoughts on the final interview.
Okay. So you're talking about the interview from Reverend James Dobson that Bundy handpicked to do his final interview. And Dr. Dobson, I believe he's still alive and he's still working for Focus on the Family, which, at least at the time that he interviewed Bundy, was very anti-pornography. They were kind of on this kick that was, we're trying to show people what can happen to you if you get involved in reading and watching pornography. So I think that Bundy decided he was going to blame a lot of the crimes that he committed, and the reason he thought about, murdering women and in a sexual way, even though he didn't quite say it that way. He felt like, well, this could maybe give me an out. First of all, I can blame it on something besides myself. And, I've got this guy that's kind of vouching for me in a way, that's saying, yes, that's the reason he did it, reinforcing what I'm saying. So it's over an hour, and it's a whole lot of, like you said, posturing between the two men, because they were each there for their own reasons, and trying to use the other one. And it's really interesting watching Bundy's interaction with him. There's one point kind of near the end of the interview where Bundy is kind of acting sorry for what he did. Dobson's asked him something about, do you feel bad about it? Or, how do you regret doing it? And Bundy kind of looks down, and then he looks at Dobson and he looks at the camera, and you can kind of see he's just wanting to know what their reactions are. It's got nothing to do with remorse. You can see it. And you can really see Bundy trying to just feign sorrow and regret. And, you're very much watching a psychopath doing what a psychopath does, which is just pretending.
When I do my talks, I use that interview a bunch, and that's one of the spots that I pick out.
Yeah.
And I want people to look at that and see if they can catch the moment where the mask slips.
Yes.
Right? Because there is a very distinct moment in that interaction where you can see the mask come off, and you can see the monster that's still there, that, if he was free, would continue to do what he had done for years and years and years. There was no reformation there. There was no sorrow there. No matter what he said, the real intention behind those eyes was, can I find a way out of here? Will this get me another stay so I can figure out another way to get out of here, so I can keep doing what I've always done?
Yeah.
It's a scary, scary thing to see that change in somebody. we didn't really cover this, and this is
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I've always thought was fascinating. That there are many different killers that experience this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Dahmer
for sure.
being one of them, and Dahmer was a lifelong alcoholic, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder your take on this, because we also know that Bundy often drank when he was committing his murders, right?
Yes.
And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. Why he did that, or was that something that that kind of fueled that rage?
I think that the idea behind Bundy doing it, and it wasn't just alcohol. I know he smoked weed quite a bit too to kind of chill himself out. I think it was kind of like liquid courage, to build up your courage, go out and find your victim and attack them. And it probably just kind of helped ease him into it, get him
Yeah.
started, and then his instincts just took over from there. But yeah, I think he did imbibe a great deal because of that. And I think that there's a lot of self-medicating that psychopaths tend to do, um, just because they're so insecure, and they're dealing with all these feelings they don't know what to do with, and they don't know a healthy way of dealing with them, so they imbibe, or you know and then
Well,
do
you
other terrible things.
well,
So, yeah.
you really see that with Bundy when you look at the
Yeah.
interactions between Diane and him, and
Mhm.
Liz and him, the insecurity that he had
Yeah.
dealing with all of that when Liz was going off and trying to kind of do the same thing he was doing.
Mhm.
He got really angry, right?
Right.
And you could see the insecurity that he faced all throughout that interaction. And so,
Yes.
when I look at that, there are a couple different things as far as the drinking is concerned.
Mhm.
This is a guy that is going out there, and he is, getting these women to come with him for whatever reason, right? And getting them alone and trying to get them comfortable, right?
Sure.
So when you're trying to get somebody comfortable and you're out there and you're kind of wanting to party or whatever, what are you going to do? You're going to give them some
Sure.
drinks, right?
Yeah.
You're going to give them, you maybe smoke some weed with them,
Yeah.
and kind of have a good time. And all during that time, you see that again, that this is how his kind of ritual plays out, right?
Right.
He starts that, he has this rapport with them. He starts drinking. He gets that courage up, right? And then he
Mhm.
inevitably ends up choking them and killing them.
Right.
And then, and it's interesting. This is not one of the first publicized cases of necrophilia, right?
Right.
So we find out later that Bundy then goes and returns to a bunch of the scenes, and where he's dumped these bodies,
Yeah.
and he then has sex with the corpses. And so,
Yeah.
this is one of the very first where that comes out in the public eye.
Yeah.
It's been happening for 100 years, but
Right.
we
Of
didn't talk
course.
about
Of
it
course. No.
until Bundy.
Yeah, and that was something that he tried to be very careful about talking about. He would talk to one of the FBI profilers about it, but that was something that he tried to keep very quiet because of, what it was that he was doing. And what was interesting was when he was confessing, at least in the third person, to Ainsworth and Stephen Michaud, when he would almost skip over the sexual part of his crimes. He could talk about the violence, he could talk about the stalking, but he just could not seem to bring himself to talk about the sex. And part of that was probably his upbringing, being
Yeah.
raised in the 50s. You didn't talk about that. It's very shameful. But also, I'm sure he realized what their reaction would have been if they had known what he was doing and known that he was committing acts against dead bodies. And plus, I really think a lot of it was he wanted to be seen as a nice guy, the guy next door. He wanted to manipulate the way people saw him. And if he was completely transparent, he, would lose that control.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that is definitely Bundy, especially in that last interview, you see him trying to be that upstanding, I had a great upbringing,
Yeah.
I'm a very well-spoken guy.
Hmm.
And, if and even in that interview, if he would have came out and said a lot of those things that he actually did, you would have a
Right.
very, very different opinion of him uh, if you just watch that, right?
Right.
So, Bundy, when you look at his crimes and what he actually did, is a very, very different monster than when you just look at him in his suit, talking in front of people and,
Right.
defending himself in court. And,
Hmm.
well, that's somebody we didn't even talk about. Of course, he gets married
Ah,
there when he's in
yes.
court, right?
Yes.
And there's a whole nother relationship that Bundy has for the last half of his life. So talk
Right.
about that a little bit.
So the woman that you're talking about, her name was Carol Boone, and she knew Bundy from work back in Washington State. And so and she kept in communication with him through the years. But when she found out that he was on trial in Florida, she actually moved down there to be with him. To at least initially, I think the idea was that they were friends and she supported him. But of course, there was something more, at least on her end. I believe that she was in love with him. And um, she was a very big proponent of his innocence. She was convinced, completely convinced that he was just being, railroaded, and they didn't actually know who committed these crimes, and he wasn't guilty of Florida or Washington State. And she had a son. He was a teenager that she brought down with her too. So I find that really kind of interesting that that he was there, kind of being influenced in a way too. Um, and so, what was so interesting was they did get married while he was in court. This was after his first, after he'd been found guilty in the sorority killings. This was the second trial, which was for Kimberly Leach, 12-year-old Kimberly, his final murder. And it was actually during the sentencing phase. So he'd already been found guilty again for Kimberly's murder. And Bundy and Carol had been trying to get married for a while. They were trying to get marriage. Well, you had to get a blood test back then. And then you had to have a marriage certificate before you could actually go and have your ceremony. Well, the judge in that case, they weren't allowed to get married, but the judge was like, you know what, we'll go ahead and get them their marriage license. And this was before the guilty verdict came down, by the way. And if Ted is allowed to go free, and I guess he thought maybe his other case would get overturned and maybe they could eventually get married. I don't know. I'm not really sure of the thinking why he let them get the blood test and then the marriage certificate, but they actually took advantage of a loophole in Florida law that said that if you attest to your intention to get married to each other, you each have to say it, that you're actually legally married. So Carol was his only defense witness. And when she was on the stand, he actually, he examined her, and then there was a cross-examination, and then he could also do a rebuttal there. So on his examination of her, where he's asking her about his character, he actually asks her, but he asked her incorrectly. So when he sits down at the desk, his attorney has to explain to him, you didn't say it right. So in the meantime, she's being cross-examined by the prosecution, and then he gets his turn again, and he actually says it correctly this time. And then by Florida law, they were married, and so there was actually someone in court to sign the marriage document. And it just blows my mind. It just shows the level of manipulation and sneakiness that he was willing to go through. But what he was trying to do was convince the jury that he was an innocent man and they shouldn't sentence him to death because, why would you do that on my wedding day?
Yeah.
And the jury still came back with the death penalty that same day.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it was, yeah, go ahead.
So so of course we also know that Carol also has Ted's baby.
Yes.
So, so when did that happen?
So that happened a couple years later. There are different stories about how it might have happened. The most credible one that I've heard was that he may have snuck out his semen to her using a condom, and then when they kissed, they passed it through their kiss, and so she was able to take it orally. So that one to me makes the most sense. But I believe the one that she was quoted talking about later was that they actually, a lot of the inmates would pool their money and actually have like pay off one of the guards who would turn away, like look away and let them have a conjugal visit. So that's also a possibility. There could have been a conjugal visit that resulted in his daughter, who was born in October of 82. Her name was Rosa. And so she was actually, there are pictures of her visiting Ted on death row in Florida. And yeah, this little brown haired girl looks just like what his victims probably look like as children.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when Bundy started confessing in 86, Carol left him and changed the little girl's name. So we do know that Carol died a few years ago in a nursing home in Washington State. There's no information on where Rosa is now. I've actually had journalists reach out to me and get me to give information about where I thought she might be. But as far as I'm concerned, she should be left alone.
Yeah.
I do know that her father's youngest sibling, Rich Bundy, it does not have a connection to her. So I imagine that none of that side of the family does. It seems that way anyway. It's unfortunate, but
yeah, I can imagine that she, now knowing like all of the stuff around her dad, that she would not want to have any connection to that family at all.
And if she was ever told who he was in reality, that's assuming she knows.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
So Bundy is the one that kind of changed it all for a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
And really, he is the one that, whether it's because of the escape attempts or because of his charismatic attitude or whatever, that he really took everything by storm. And he's the one that ended up being the poster boy for serial killers for the next 30 years.
Oh my God.
And,
even now.
Yeah.
50 years. Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
It is. And I really think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he did not look like a serial killer. He looked like just an average guy, conservative, voted Republican, could have worked in the government, he just looked normal.
Yeah.
And he was anything but.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah. And it's the same thing when you look at Gacy, right?
Yeah.
Gacy is another one that, most people thought, he was also very political, doing all these things that people thought he was just the normal guy, the guy next door. And, he ends up having all these bodies underneath the house.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think? Because, Bundy officially, what was his victim count officially?
Admittedly, somewhere between 30 and 36. Now, people suggest that there were more than that, but there haven't been any other victims connected to him since that number was published.
What do
I think? I think there was more than 36. There were a couple of, it was a double murder in New Jersey that happened in 1969 that I think could have been him. He was in the area. So it was two young women. Their bodies were found in their convertible. So possible.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, of course there are people that claim that he may have had up to 100 or, and, who knows?
Much.
Yeah. That's a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
But, I think another thing that is really interesting, and I'm trying to grab it back because it's starting to run.
I hear you.
I thought of something
same thing.
Right when you were talking about that.
Yeah.
I remember what it was. Bundy we talked about him always trying to get out and, trying to come up with all these things.
Yeah.
One of the things that he did is he decided to work with the FBI, right?
Right.
And he was trying to position himself as, I'm an expert in this stuff because I went out there and did it all these times, and I can help you catch these other killers. And he actually does help them a little bit with profiling for Green River, right?
Right.
Which ends up being
a little bit.
He thought that he could do that, but and of course we find out that later on that's Gary Ridgway, but he does point them in the direction and gives them a little bit of helpful information.
It was really more helpful about serial killers in general and some of his own crimes. He did note that the killer would have returned to the victims, which we found out Ridgway was doing. So I think that was really the only thing he was spot on with him in particular.
I wonder why that was. Probably because he was doing it.
He was doing it.
Of course he knew that.
Of course he did. Going back and, Bundy even admitted that he enjoyed watching the bodies decompose. He liked watching the different colors of the skin change.
Wow.
Yeah. So he actually enjoyed that. I imagine that Ridgway did too.
I can't imagine that. Some of the same stuff, of course, with Dahmer. He, one of his victims, when he was still at his grandmother's house, he kept the body for, I think, 4 or 5 days until it became too decomposed for him to even be attracted to.
Yeah.
That's saying a lot, right? But it's just amazing. Like, and I mean, obviously there are people that do that professionally, that's what they do. And that's fascinating for them. I do not even like to look at like wounds and stuff. And not my thing.
No.
Like, it's gross. People want to show me that shit all the time, and I'm like, why are you showing me that? I don't want to see
I'm
that.
so glad they don't do that to me. Thank goodness.
Yeah, I don't know why, but so it's fascinating for some people, and people that obviously have these kinds of paraphilias. That is something that is exciting to them or interesting to them. I don't know. I couldn't do that.
I can't connect with that. But to each their own. If you're not hurting anybody, it doesn't matter to me what people are doing.
Yeah, I mean, go. And honestly, like the Body Farm, that is not that far from me, right? They do that out there, but they do it for a reason, right? They do it, or at least I'm hoping that's why they do it.
We don't need to. Let's not ask any questions.
Yeah. But the belief is they're doing it so that they can understand diseases and decomposition, and all of these things, which is really helpful for us as far as forensics is concerned. Because of that Body Farm, they've been able to understand, what could happen in certain circumstances, and that's how they get. Now they have a science based around the decomposition times, how long a body could be lying in water to get this result, and so they can really drill down a time of death and things like that are very, very helpful for forensics now. So if we didn't have that, it would be extremely difficult. You'd have to like almost catch somebody in the act to say that they actually did it. So it's fascinating how far our technology has come since the crimes of Bundy and everything, during a day where none of the police departments talked. And even though they don't like doing it now, there's plenty of intercommunication that happens about crimes that happen in different counties. And, because that was the biggest thing, right? The counties weren't even talking to each other. So we could just go over the county line and kill somebody else. Nobody ever knew.
Yeah. And he knew that because he worked with the police before in Seattle.
Yeah. Cause now I might be getting him confused with somebody else, but several of them did this. They would do ride-alongs and stuff with the police, and they'd become really, really friendly with them. I know Kemper did that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would go on ride-alongs with them, so he got to know everybody. It's one of the reasons why, even when he called and said that he killed his mother, they didn't believe him.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
unbelievable.
He was
Right?
old Eddie, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Big dumb Ed, right? Yeah.
Right.
You
And
know,
it you have to think about the amount of gumption that someone would have to have. You're out there committing all these crimes and you're hanging out with the cops
yeah.
the rest of the time.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you just look at oh, why can't I think of his name right now? The one guy, the Idaho guy, that case. What is
Brian
his name?
Koberger.
Yeah, Koberger, right?
Yeah.
And this is another guy that, and of course we don't know. He's not convicted of anything yet.
Right.
There's probably a bunch of information out there now that
Mhm.
seems like there's the possibility that it wasn't him. But when we first learn about this is a guy who's going to school for all of this, right?
Right. Yes.
And one of our favorite authors, Catherine Ramsland, is one of
Mhm.
his instructors, right?
Right.
And he is, out there. And if he did do it, that's a big if. We don't know that. But if he did do it, this is a guy that's using all of the information that he can get to commit these crimes.
Right.
And if he did a fucking horrible job of it.
He really did. The fact that he was at his parents' home, like taking some sort of evidence, I guess, and like throwing it in the neighbor's trash can. Who else would do that? An
Yeah.
innocent person would not do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I absolutely want to be at his trial. I hope he goes to trial so I can be there. I'm fascinated by the whole case.
Yeah, that case is incredible. I have not kept up with it with a bunch of the stuff that's going on recently.
Yeah.
And I keep hearing people talk about it, bits and pieces here and there. And I think when I saw the initial evidence that was coming in, I thought they got this guy dead to rights, man. There's no way he's getting out of it. And now all this other stuff has come out. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the Delphi case, right?
Yeah.
Delphi is crazy. All the stuff that's going on. And I was just listening today. Bob Mata was on there, and Allie were talking about the Judge Gall and all of the stuff that she denied. That the lawyers are no longer allowed to talk about. They can't bring up anything about anything ritualistic.
Yeah, right. I heard
which
about
is
that.
just crazy that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then you've got Gilgo Beach, right? That is happening right now.
Oh, Rex Heuermann, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it looks like they got Rex, man. Like that guy, there is so much information.
Yes.
All the burner phones and all the stuff they found in his house.
He needs to plead out. He's not gonna win.
Yeah, he's going down for all of that. Mm-hmm. Now, whether he goes down for the 4 or the 13, who knows? But it's fascinating because we always talk about, and I've been guilty of this too, that the time of the serial killer has kind of the golden age of that is done, right? Our forensics are so good now that people can't get away with it. But then you look at Gilgo Beach, right? That's a recent case, but it's been going on for 20 years. It's not.
But they were also stalled by the police themselves. It was the guy that was in charge. He was committing all these other crimes and didn't want anyone to find out. So he wasn't allowing them to go forward with the task force. So that was a big part of why they were stalled out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's really interesting. And of course, what we have now is you see all the mass murder that happens because they're no longer able to get away with. Yeah. They're not able to get away with, we're going to kill one here and cool off, and then we'll kill another one because they get caught after the first or the second one. Mm-hmm. Now they go out there and they shoot 40 people at one time. And then either kill themselves or get arrested and go to jail. But,
and mass and spree killers tend to commit suicide more than serial killers ever did. So, there's a difference in the self-preservation.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that is because there is a very different mindset that's going on between the two.
Yeah.
Serial killers are secretive and they keep things really close because they're lifelong narcissists, right? And they're only concerned about themselves. Whereas a spree killer or a mass murderer is very much a lot of times those people are, they have very, very depressive phases.
Hmm.
They're trying to strike out towards a group of people or people that have wronged them for some reason,
Yeah.
and they're trying to make a point. And once that point is made, there's no reason for them to be around anymore.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
done. Whereas a serial killer, they're not really trying to make a point. They're trying to fulfill a need. And
Yep.
that need is never fulfilled, right? It continues to need
Hmm.
to be fulfilled. And
Right.
that fantasy that they have in their head is never realized
Yeah.
ever, because like
It's impossible.
reality, yeah, it never happens.
Hmm.
It's the same thing. All of us, we all daydream about different things, and what if I did this, and what if I did that? Well,
Yeah.
these guys are having these fantasies about these really dark, terrible things, but those never come true either.
Right.
So it's that constant cycle that happens over and over and over again.
Yep. Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. They never reach the end.
Yeah. All
And yet
right.
they
So
continue to want to. Yep. What?
anything else you want to add about old Ted, since we've like gotten way off track?
Well, I will note that unfortunately he does get mythologized a great deal. People start to see him as the golden boy and start to downplay a lot of the crimes he committed because he, was nice looking or clean cut or, looked very normal. And I've had people ask me if I really think he did it or if I really think that he was such a bad person. And I mean, you have to look beyond that. He was a really, really bad person. And regardless of what he may have experienced as a child, regardless of, what he may have espoused to the public, he was killing these women. He was taking their lives away and just completely destroying their families. And so we have to consider the reality of the crimes that he was committing, the reality of the pain and anguish he left behind for the families. Some of the victims have never been found. Some of the victims, they only found parts of them or found their bones, and there's no closure for them, even with the death of Bundy.
Yeah.
So let's remember that these were real people. These victims were not one dimensional. They had lives, they had ambitions, and Bundy took that away from them. And he was a
Yeah.
horrible human being.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know that you and I have
Mhm.
talked about doing a whole host of things together.
Yes.
And several of those things are going to come to fruition. There is in the works at some point, these two faces will be coming across your screens quite a bit,
Yep.
because we have some plans on doing a little bit of podcasting ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, so get used to it. We may be here for a while talking about all kinds of wild stuff. So
Yeah.
if you guys enjoy this, make sure you let us know, because we're going to be spending a whole lot more time talking about all of this stuff and different cases and
Yeah.
all kinds of things, with a very different focus than what this has. And also, if you guys like that, we've got some ideas to write a few things,
Yes.
and a crazy project that is going to take up a whole bunch of time,
Yep.
and lots of things, really diving deep into this idea. And we kind of talked about it a bunch tonight about how the childhood really affects what happens later on. And
Mhm.
one of the things that, as I guess social scientists, right, that we try to do is you try to take a theory that you have, and you then take the evidence that's there and you try to prove that out. And if the theory is worth anything, you get evidence on the back end and it proves itself. And so that's one of the things that we want to do. And it was really EJ's idea, and not mine. But talking about all the childhoods of a lot of these different killers and seeing what was it in their childhood, if anything, uh, created what they would become later on in life. So that's something that we're actively working on, and playing around with some ideas there. and that'll be coming at you guys soon. So EJ, let them know where they can pick up Ted Bundy, Memories of the Beast.
Yep, that's available on Amazon. So just type in Ted Bundy, Memories of the Beast, or you can type in my name, EJ Hammon, and it will come up. And again, just keep your eyes open for the movie coming up soon about the Baton Rouge serial killer, Derek Todd Lee, and any other projects that might be coming down the pipeline.
And I will tell you that if she ever wears white, we will make sure that we play the Jurassic Park music.
Oh my God, I don't even know what that means.
Because I always want to call you Hammond with a D at the end. And the guy in Jurassic Park is Hammond, right?
I've never seen that movie.
What? How have you never seen Jurassic Park?
I didn't know I was in it.
Oh my God. Well,
one day I'll watch it.
You need to watch Jurassic.
Okay.
At least you have to watch the first one, because the first one is incredible. It's a great movie.
I'll keep that in mind.
All right. Well, I'm gonna send you off, and everybody say bye to EJ.
Hi, everybody.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode. So glad that EJ could join us for this little discussion about Bundy. I know it's something that has been a focus of her study for a very, very long time. One of the people that I always go to when I have questions, because I know a lot about a little, and she knows a lot about that. so I always love talking to her about that. And she has got a breadth of knowledge about a lot of different things. So we're going to be talking about that upcoming here in the future, and doing a whole bunch of stuff together. It was really, we mentioned this a little bit, but Dark History Con, they just had their 10th show. Sadly, neither one of us could be at that show, but it is the show that really brought a lot of us together. It was the one that, and if you don't know Brian, you need to go. It is in Champaign, Illinois. They've been doing it at the Orpheum Theater there for the last couple years, but it is an incredible show. He does a great job of bringing everybody together. It's very true crime focused. And I know myself, I ended up meeting EJ there. I also met John Borowski there, Steve Gianangelo. I met several other people that are all involved in the true crime community. And it has been really incredible to be able to get to meet all those people in one place. And we've really gotten to know each other really well, and have spent a lot of time on stage together because of that, and really learning each other's skills. So if you ever get a chance, go there, check it out in Champaign. It is a fantastic show. And yeah, it's one of those weekends where we all get together and just hang out. I also met David, oh my goodness, I can't think of his last name now. Thibodeau, who was there at the Waco incident with David Koresh, right? He was there in the compound with them. He was one of the Branch Davidians, and that guy literally changed my mind on what happened there at Waco. Matter of fact, hopefully at some point I'll be able to get him on, and we can talk about Waco and all the stuff that happened there. That is something that I really, really hope to do. So David Thibodeau, if you're out there, know that I'm coming, and I'll be trying to get you, dragging you onto the podcast so we can talk about that. But thank you guys so much for joining us. Make sure you click that like button, and I don't know, smash the follow, or whatever the hell it is that they say to do that stuff, so that you can make sure that you're up to date on everything that we're doing as we're bringing out all of these lovely episodes, and trying to get you some knowledge. And like I always say, don't take my word for it. I'm just one person. I have my own ideas, my own thoughts about things. Research this shit for yourselves. If you are interested in true crime, don't listen to all of the documentaries and stuff. Watch them, but take it all in and understand it from every angle so that you really have a good understanding of all of these cases. And then you can make up your own mind of who you think did it and why they did it and how they did it. Don't just take one person's opinion, not even mine. So, all right, I will see you all soon. Thank you guys.